Hi everyone, welcome to TalentEgg Talks, live from the Egg Carton. We're very happy to be here to answer your questions about interview, job search, and everything related to that. My name is Maria Wasserman, and I'm the Content and Marketing Coordinator at TalentEgg. And we're joined today by Mary Barrell, our president, who will be answering your questions. Please send them in the comments below, and we'll try to get to all of them today. Mary, thank you very much for joining. Please introduce yourself.
You just did. I'm president of TalentEgg, and I've been in this role for about 3 years, and I'm really excited about working with our team to help provide helpful information to students and grads and early career professionals who are job seekers out getting their own role in the world in their internships or co-ops or entry-level jobs. And we've got lots of content that is on our website to support you in that sort of school-to-work transition or to help you make that next role, that jump to that next job that you're looking for. So I understand that we have a theme today, and it's an important one and a tough one too, is how to prepare for interviews?
Yes, exactly. And I'm sure that all of our audience is very grateful for your expertise, and they will find lots of value in this conversation. So we will be going over some common interview questions, some tricky interview questions, and just in general how to prepare for an interview.
Sure.
So thank you for being here. Like I said, please send us questions, but we'll start with pre-submitted questions. So let's start with this. What should I know about the company before going in for an interview?
Well, I think obviously I hope that you've already done your research before you've actually applied for the job, and if you've been effective at doing that research, you've been able to put together a cover letter and a CV that's going to persuade a recruiter to set up an interview with you. So hopefully you've done some of that research. Once you've discovered that you do have an interview lined up, it's really important to understand who it is and the background of the person that you might be meeting with, if that's at all possible. And you can do that by looking on the actual employer's website. They may have some information about their recruitment team. You can actually come to TalentEgg and see whether they're a client of ours, because we provide a lot of information about recruiters who work for different employers and what they're looking for in a candidate. You can check their LinkedIn profile and other sorts of online information. Basically, you'll want to understand the role that you're going to be applying for. So if it's for a grad program or an internship, understanding how it works, the duration, the kind of areas that it's going to be covering. If it's a rotational program, understand the kind of different departments that you're going to be going to. As much as you can, also do a little bit of research about what is that company all about. Typically, they'll have some information about their core values of that organization, what their goals are, and so having that kind of awareness will provide you both with a lot more comfort in terms of what you're prepared to say in the interview, but also I think gives you more confidence in understanding who it is that you might be speaking to. And the more research that you can do, the better that you can show that you're serious about your career, and that you're taking and going the extra mile to take the extra effort to actually prepare for that interview.
Yes, all of this advice is so valuable. Thank you. We actually have our first Instagram question, and someone is asking, what is the best way I can present myself in an interview?
Oh, well, there's many facets of that. Obviously, there's the personal dress at the time of your interview. You'll want to make sure that you are dressed in a professional manner, or at least as appropriate to the culture of that organization. There's an old saying that says, you can't be overdressed. I think you'd want to err on the side of being more formal than underdressed. So, a nice suit jacket. You don't necessarily have to wear a tie, but open collar if you're a gentleman, and a jacket is good. If you're a woman, be sure that you're wearing something that is professional, that reflects the kind of role that it is that you're looking for, understanding that certain industries are more conservative than others. So if it's a tech job, they might have a much more relaxed kind of dress code than, say, if you're interviewing at a bank. So keep that in mind. And if you have any friends that work there or any kind of contacts, you can also get their inside information about that. We have a lot of articles about how to dress for interviews on our website, so take a look at those. In terms of the overall, I guess, presentation at the interview, there's a couple things you want to make sure every time. Get there early. Make sure that you know where you're going to. So even I used to scout the location where I was actually going for an interview. Sometimes before that day. But if I was the first time going to that particular location, I would make sure that I was early. And I'd just go for coffee somewhere close by and calm down before going to the interview. You want to present yourself as confident, but not overconfident. Enthusiastic, of course, and because you've done your research, knowledgeable about the organization you're interviewing with and the role that you're interested in.
That sounds good. That reminds me, when I was interviewing for this job, I sat across the street in the coffee shop for like an hour before this interview. So yes.
There you go. That was very wise, because you never know when you're going to have traffic issues or the TTC or the subway system won't work, so it might make you late, so you just don't want to be late.
Absolutely, yeah, that definitely sends the wrong message if you're late on the first interview. Thank you for that. Let's move on to another pre-submitted question. What are some tips for a phone interview?
Well, phone interviews are interesting. They're both more challenging because you don't have the eye contact with the individual who's interviewing you, and you don't have that sort of personal connection. But at the same time, you have a few advantages. For example, if you have sort of ideas about your background or in your CV that you want to highlight, you can actually have point form notes and have them in front of you close by so that you can actually address those and you won't forget them in the middle of the pressure of being in an interview. And so it's an interesting trade-off. It's harder to keep a personal kind of connection, but it's in the other sense, it's easier for you to sort of have, sort of cues. The other thing to keep in mind is make sure your battery is, if you're phoning from a cell phone, obviously make sure your battery is full. Make sure that you have, you're not surrounded in a noisy area. Try and find a private, quiet place so that you're not distracted in the middle of an answer, but also so that the individual who's interviewing can actually hear you. And it also allows you to concentrate more closely on the questions that are asked, so you're answering in a more meaningful way.
Great, thank you so much. We have a question from Facebook. What is the best way to prepare for a case study interview?
Well, those are really interesting. The purpose of a case study interview is really to test these things that are very hard to demonstrate within your CV or your cover letter, and even in an interview, because what they're testing are certain kinds of core competencies, your ability to tackle a problem. Sometimes, typically they're based on a real business problem or a fictional business problem, but a real industry, and they're going to ask you to actually come up with some sort of solution that they confront you with in terms of challenging you to be able to come up with some solutions that make sense from a business point of view. But what they're really looking for is, how do you address and tackle a problem? How do you think and solve problems? You're demonstrating a capacity to have critical thinking, to be able to analyze the problem. They're typically, these case studies are often very, very complex. There'll be lots of details in them, and they'll be testing you on whether you're able to identify the key points of it. And then to be able to communicate in an effective way the actual solution you're proposing. It's not really about whether there's a right or wrong answer. It's really about your process of how you solve that problem that they're looking for. And these are what we call core competencies. They want to see all the things that I mentioned: critical thinking, problem solving, communication, effectively being able to do that under pressure, and being able to justify your rationale behind it.
Makes total sense. Thank you. Actually, let's move to a question. What's the best way to answer what makes you the best candidate for this job? This also came from Instagram.
I think it's important to be authentic in any interview, but also be addressing why you applied for that job. I mean, typically it's because it touches on something that you're passionate about. It's part of your critical skills. It's in an industry that reflects where you want to go in your career. It allows you an opportunity to spread your wings and stretch your skills in certain areas. So typically, if you analyze why you actually wanted to apply for this role, and not just because it's a fabulous employer, but why it's attractive to you, you'll I think do a really good job at being providing an authentic and a clear and believable response that employers are looking for. They're really trying to get to the heart of what is your motivation, and are you likely to flourish within that role, and what's your potential longevity? Are you going to leave the job as soon as something that you perceive as better comes up? Mm-hmm. So showing your passion, but also taking that passion and actually supporting it with your real feelings will come across in I think a persuasive way and a real way to a recruiter.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Let's see what else is here. Also on Instagram, someone's asking, what are some ways to tell an employer about my success without coming across as cocky or bragging?
Yeah, that's a tough one, and it's all about how you present yourself. But you have to understand that employers are looking for confident people, not arrogant people. But I think a good way of doing it is by providing real-life examples of how you accomplish things. So instead of just saying I'm fabulous at this particular skill, actually saying what I was able to do in my last employment, or even in the association that I volunteer for, I was able to make these kinds of measurable changes and improvements. Mm-hmm. And that's a way of actually grounding your you should be singing your own praises, but at the same time you're grounding them in fact, mm-hmm. and allows you to come across as somebody who's really providing demonstrable evidence that you are what you say you are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think all of that means that you should really prepare for an interview, right? And hopefully we're helping all of you prepare for your interviews right now. So not just come up with answers on the fly, but actually take your time to prepare.
Yeah, right? That's really important. So you should actually have in your back pocket real meaningful accomplishments. Yeah. And it could be in a variety of different ways, and it could be in previous employment, it could be in situations where you're volunteering, it could be within your studies, mm-hmm. but what you want to do is to be able to show results. Yeah. And that's a way of actually preparing in advance, so that again, when you're under pressure, you won't forget mm-hmm. that you have these accomplishments to tell. And also it gives you more confidence going in when mm-hmm. I've thought about this, I know I've accomplished these remarkable things that I'm proud of, and it just gives you more confidence as you go to that interview.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Another question from Facebook, actually. How should I calm my nerves before and during the interview?
Well, I think if you do kind of the preparation that we've been talking about, that'll go a long way towards calming yourself down. I mean, there's nothing more stressful than trying to get to a place that you're late, and the more that you're late and you're desperately rushing to get there makes you even more nervous. So again, being there early, doing your preparation and research in advance, again, will give you more confidence. You'll have a better expectation of what to expect. Once you're there and you're waiting, you'll be probably presented with a particular area where you can sit and wait, and before the interviewer will come and meet you and bring you into the room that you're going to be having the interview in. Try to take a few deep breaths. Make sure to have, if they offer you water, it's not a bad idea to have it, because when we're stressed we get dry mouth and it's hard to talk. So it's not a bad thing to sort of prepare yourself, knowing that you're going to get a little stressed under the pressure. And understanding that if you make a personal connection with this person, and I don't mean you're going to strike up a friendship, I just mean, if you relate to them and it's not just a presentation of you, but you're actually having a dialogue, then a lot of those nerves sort of slip away.
Yeah, it makes it so much more natural, right?
Right, yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you. Let's move on. Let's do another pre-submitted one. I don't have a lot of work experience. How can I show off my skills when I've only volunteered part-time?
Well, that's a double-sided question, because it says I don't have much work experience, but they may have some.
Yeah.
They may have worked part-time, and they've done some volunteer work, obviously. So volunteer work is really a valuable kind of exercise for somebody who's trying to break into their career, because it actually allows you to develop skills that are really important to any job. So being able to be responsible, showing up when required, being able to have the trust of colleagues who will rely on you to work in a group. It'll teach you how to communicate effectively across generations for management or even with your colleagues. All these kinds of things we call core competencies or soft skills. These are things that you develop over time. Some people are naturally more comfortable in a social environment, but the more that you put yourself into a circumstance that's professional in nature, the more that you're able to develop those over time. And the other thing I think it also helps you do is if you're working within an office environment, if you've never done that before, there's just certain things that you don't do in an office, and they're kind of, well, we have some content about things like that within our on our blog on the incubator, but really until you're there, you don't really know. And so I think testing yourself and learning these skills in an environment where you're volunteering your time is a different thing than trying to actually learn them on the job, and it'll give you more skills going into a job when you actually go there. To be able to present yourself in an interview, you should use those sort of volunteer experiences. They tell a story about you, about what you're passionate about. It provides a window into who you are as a person. One of the biggest challenges of recruiters is not just to understand your technical skills, which are set out in your CV, but also, is this person the kind of person I want in my organization? Will they fit with the others in my team? Who is that person? What do they care about? What are their values? And will it match up with the fit that I'm looking for in my organization? So that kind of volunteer experience actually helps you tell that story, and in a way that's demonstrable, because you've demonstrated you've done something. It's not just you're describing yourself, you're actually showing them that you've done this. So, and any work experience, part-time work, if you did it in high school, anything that can show that you have been able to be relied upon by an employer to actually do your job, and that you've realized that you've picked up skills along the way, and that you've made a positive contribution and results is important to be able to tell. And any way that you can do that will go to your benefit in terms of being a successful interview.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you. Let's see. On Instagram, someone's asking, what should I do moving forward after an interview and it goes poorly or I don't get the job?
Well, dust yourself off. Understand you're not going to win every single time, and you may have done a fantastic job at the interview, and there was just something that another person did or fit or had certain qualifications that you didn't have, or it just, there may be very good reasons of why you didn't get the job, but doesn't mean that you aren't a great candidate. So don't let it get you down. And I think the other thing to do is you can ask for feedback, and you may not always get it from the recruiter or the employer, but many will tell you as well. And if you're interested and it's not a bad thing to contemplate. You know, I've been very impressed with some people that we've interviewed that didn't actually get the role that they interviewed for, but they came back and they asked for feedback, but they also said, thank you for this opportunity to actually do the interview. I'm still enthusiastic about working with you and with the company. Would you please keep me in mind for future opportunities? And that's a nice, pleasant closing to that relationship. Mm-hmm. And that relationship may be the very person that didn't give you that job the first time might be the one that gives you the job the next time. Yeah. So it's never a bad thing. Don't burn your bridges. Keep that relationship positive, and you know, that will be a huge advantage to you in the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes so much sense, because no matter how big the industry could seem, everyone knows each other.
Yes.
Right? So
yeah.
You never know who you might meet, who might help you in the future.
No, truly.
Absolutely. Okay. Someone on Facebook is asking, how do I answer when the employer asks if I have any questions for them?
Well, hopefully you have some questions. You know, I think that you should stick to things that are relevant to the role and to you as a candidate. So coming with canned questions about what is the vision of this company just doesn't sound authentic, really. But I think it would be fair to ask what is it that you're looking for on your team, or what are the primary functions for this role that I'm applying for. I think that if you make sure that it's connected to that job that you're actually applying for, then it's meaningful information that you might want to know anyway. And also, it doesn't sound like you've just prepped an answer that's kind of rehearsed, and it keeps it more of a real conversation.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Let's see. On Instagram, someone's asking, what is the best way to answer, what is your greatest weakness? Is there a right or wrong answer?
Well, personally, I mean, I think there's a lot of literature out there that says, well, always spin that so that it's a positive thing. Yeah. And so, you know, my greatest weakness is that I'm a perfectionist. And obviously, that just comes off as completely inauthentic and silly, sort of as though you're kind of doing a trick answer. You know, I think there's ways of actually being honest with that without, if you're really terrible at something, I wouldn't necessarily bring that up. But if you know that, you know, my personal weakness is I might take on too much and be juggling things. So, you know, I think if you can keep it as real as possible without making it too dramatic, but also to suggest that you've come up with ways, solutions to actually mitigate that weakness. And so it's something that you work on all the time.
Yeah, that's a great example. Perfect. Also on Instagram, someone is asking, do you have some tips for group interviews?
Yeah, the group interviews are interesting. There's group interviews, of course, are when you have a number of candidates that are being interviewed at the same time. And that's a real tough one, because on the one hand, you want to stand out in the crowd, but at the same time, you don't want to be the first one to answer every question and to be seen as not respectful of other people. So you have to balance it very carefully to ensure that you are both responsive to the questions and prepared to answer, and that you are confident in them, but also be sure to be respectful to the other people that are also being interviewed if they're speaking. Don't interrupt them, don't speak over them. If you disagree with an answer and you're asked to say it with respect, if you have a different point of view, because you're going to be judged not just in how you communicate, but also how you sort of interact with other people. It's not just your answer that's relevant, it's how you're behaving. So, you know, be polite and do your best to sort of present yourself in a confident forthright way.
That sounds very stressful, but some of us need to go through this, so good luck. Thank you everybody for asking questions. Sorry, please keep them coming. We just have about 5 minutes left. And let's just keep going. On Facebook, someone is asking, should I follow up after the interview?
Yeah, we kind of touched on that a little earlier. I would say follow-up is a good idea, and it's really just common courtesy. So following up, saying thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you and learn more about this opportunity. I'm very enthusiastic about the opportunity and look forward to hearing back from you in the future. And if there's any questions that you might have about my CV or my background, please feel free to reach out. And they'll just know that you're engaged, and it's also courteous.
Yeah.
So it shows a professional courtesy, and it demonstrates a kind of professionalism that impresses recruiters.
Yeah, and it goes back to building relationships,
right.
All of that. Perfect, thank you. Okay, let's just do maybe a few more. So we've answered like most of these, I think. Oh, this one's an interesting one. How do I approach a stress interview?
Oh my goodness. Well, we kind of talked about that. The understanding that it's intended to be a stress interview, and you may not be aware of that. When I was interviewing for articling positions, I had heard about this one law firm that set up the interview process to create a stressful environment. So, for example, there'd be certain things that would happen where somebody would walk into the room just unexpectedly and behave as though this was just by accident, and then they were watching how you would respond to that new person. You know, did it throw you off? Did you introduce yourself? And it was fascinating to learn, because I actually knew somebody who had articled with them the year before, and she told me, if at the end of the interview you turn left, they're going to invite you to dinner. If you turn right, you didn't make it. And so the interesting thing was, I knew it was a stress interview, and I had sort of insight into what to expect, and so that kind of calmed me down. And I would say that not all organizations that have these kind of stress interviews are the kind of places you'd want to work anyway. Nevertheless, by understanding what they were trying to achieve, helped me prepare for that. So.
And it's a great learning experience, although very stressful
Right.
and nerve-wracking, but makes you a better candidate, I think,
Yes.
in the long run. Okay. Okay, one more question from Instagram. One of the biggest sources of anxiety for me are questions about salary expectations. How do I answer that?
Well, it is a tough question, because you don't want to actually give an answer that puts you out of the range, but you don't want to want to give too low a salary expectation as well, because obviously they might well go down to what you're asking, and if you underprice yourself, then that's to your detriment. I think doing your research in advance is really helpful. In terms of, we again have guides on our website that actually can help you have a better understanding of typical salary ranges in different industries for different roles, so that you're not way off base when you say what your expectations are. The other thing to do is really contemplate, all right, what kind of an organization is this? Is it a small business? Is it a large enterprise that has sort of fixed kind of salaries that they would give out? You really have to sort of balance both those things. And then the final thing I would say was to ensure that you give a range. So I would not sort of fix my price on a single salary number, but rather a range that is sort of consistent with the role.
Makes sense. Well, I think this is all the time we have for today. Thank you very much, everybody, for asking your questions. We're excited to come back and do more TalentEgg talks. just with Mary and with our exciting employers. Stay tuned. Follow us on social media. You'll be the first to know when we announce new events. And thank you very much, Mary, for your time.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you. See you next time.
See you next time.